Check, check, check. 1, 2. Okay. Sounds good on my end. Just logging in a little early to try this out. Make sure I'm not just starting not knowing what the fuck I'm doing. Groovy. Still a couple minutes, everybody. Just a couple extra tests. Sounds pretty good. Cool. So I think I can figure out where the lag is, and I can work with that accordingly. Groovy. All right, so I don't got anybody in here, but I might as well get started and get this going. Hello, coming to you from Silhouette Land, apparently. It's Mike Manzer. How you doing? It's been a little while since I've actually talked to the people like this. Probably going back to February. Probably around the time that I started Nitekvlt as a podcast with my friend Chris Blush. And let me just say right off the top, it will be making a comeback. And this is step one of that. This current stream, I am doing through YouTube and Facebook, as far as I know. And depending on how this goes, I'm going to try doing this a bunch of times this week. See if I can get into the, swing of things. And yeah. And eventually, I'll be able to get Nick in here, Chris in here. Sorry, names. I'm going to fuck this up like the first time I do this, but, that's part of the fun in it, for me at least. It's just like learn how to do this all over again. It's weird, but, I'm liking it. So today, start this all back. I'm gonna do a format change for Nitekvlt. So when we ended in April, I quickly got burnt out on the format and the schedule. And, just the way everything happened, it all just kind of hit at the same time. And, we weren't on the same kind of, thing that we were on before. So it was hard to get him out to, my area to record. So I had to work a few things out. And luckily they gave me time to, take care of some things that I had to take care of and able to, do what I need to do. And got DJs set up. I've probably told a lot of you out there watching this about it. I have been recording. I usually do like hour and a half, enough to fit a 90-minute cassette tape. And spinning records and stuff. So if you want to hear that, as of right now, I can tell you to get in my DMs either here or on Instagram. I'll find a way to put my Instagram down in the description. And you can get at me. And we'll work it out. So anyway, this is the pilot for, you know, the new segment I want to do. One of the first of all the new segments that I want to do, and I'm going to call this Punk Rock BC. Now, what Punk Rock BC is I've been to shows almost the past 20 years, you know, and like, you know, excluding last year, you know, it's been about 17, 18 years of shows. And, you know, I have a lot of stories from those shows. These shows, you know, like all of the people that I met through punk rock and surrounding kind of communities. I, you know, I just see the world differently because of these experiences. And, you know, I have that nostalgia for, you know, the places I used to go as a kid. And, you know, see these bands that would just like change the way I look at music and, you know, live performance and art in general a lot of times, you know. And there's a lot of these places that aren't around anymore. And sometimes I like to be poetic about some of these old places that, you know, in retrospect kind of scare me or gross me out in many ways. But, you know, at the time, it was very formative. It had effects on me that, you know, I'm, you know, still realizing to this day. So what I want to do is take 6 venues throughout my life and take a show from each of these 6 venues and just talk about how this venue, you know, like formed this love of live music, something that I definitely hold a lot more sacred now that I was without it for about a year and a half. And, you know, I want to get people excited about shows again so they're able to, you know, do whatever they have to do to make sure that shows stick around so we can all get back to going to shows and seeing music the way it was meant to be seen live. And you can't convince me otherwise. So, you know, just do what you got to do, man. Keep everybody safe around you. Don't be irresponsible. But let's get shit going and keep it going as long as we possibly can. Let's take the lessons that we've learned, not only this year of no shows, but all the lessons of the past that we learned from going to all these shows and crazy events and parties and so on. And, you know, let's not use them to be bitter, jaded, and use it to talk about what's wrong with modern generations and how they make music or how they perform or create, you know. And like, let's just make it where like we want like the next generation to get into this just as much as we were into it. At least I do. But, you know, throughout the past few years, you know, I've come to the realization that it's not punk rock anymore that really excites me. It's really like only about like an eighth of what I listen to lately. It's been that way for a while. And with live shows, like I've gotten to the point where I just like going to a show, and anytime I can possibly get there, I'm going to go support local music, especially now because they haven't been able to make money in a long time. So you gotta, I've been the few shows I've played. I've always been saying like, go out there and buy fucking merch. Give these people all the money you can, support them so they can get home and be able to continue to do what they love. Nobody I see around me wants to be on like a big label and make all the. It's like, no, you work with what you got, and that's what's important. That's what makes you real. That's what gets you the real respect within your community. So, I'm still learning. I'm one of the worst hype men in history. But you know what? It's all I know. It's all I got. And I'm going to throw it in as many people's faces as I can. And, if they don't enjoy it, they can leave it. The great thing about the internet is it's almost like the greatest television package of all time, because you don't like something, there's 500,000 different variations on that same thing. So you can go find it elsewhere. That's what's important. So I want to start off though. I got into going to shows, young. But as far as finding music, I was very young. I was about 6 for the earliest memory of, a big musical awakening for me. But, like my parents always had records around. And, they were always playing records. The music was constant. Film was constant. They had the VHS. They had like, I even realized this back at the time when I was young, but they taped like everything off of HBO. And every time one of the Cinemax or HBO, every time they had one of the weekend deals where you get it for free if you're on a certain cable plan, they would just tape everything because that was their only opportunity to see it. We didn't really have a lot of like tapes as far as like pre-recorded stuff. It was all just stuff we got off of the television. But yeah, they always had the big chest of records. I remember being a young kid flipping through, and just I love the artwork. And it was early on having the analog format in my hands, feeling it, like it has a scent to it, it has like a warmth to it for me. And I just felt myself drawn to it. I was buying CDs like everybody else. In the 90s, you couldn't get vinyl. I know that sounds a little cliche, and you could in certain spots, but in Springfield, everything was like a Strawberries and Record Town, I think was the name of another one. But these like shopping mall kind of record stores that were all over the place, and they would all have like many different types of formats and stuff. I remember going into Media Play, and it was right when the DVD came out. They had a Ace Ventura Pet Detective, which I had on VHS by that point. And just seeing it on this new format, it's like, oh, you can press this button and hear the director talk about the film or what have you. I never heard of anything like that. And, while I was looking at all that kind of cool film stuff happening, I was also, digging through CDs and such. As a kid, you grow up with the radio. That's almost like your show. Like that's your word of mouth in the '90s was, listening to the local radio and picking up on whatever you thought was interesting. And I also had parents that were, very eclectic in their tastes. And later on, when I would get into more offbeat, I guess, kind of music, they were, very supportive from the get-go. My dad used to take me to shows, and he enjoyed it just as much as I did. He would chat with all the band members. I remember being 15. He's yakking it up with Jim Martin at the Wallingford Knights of Columbus. And, Jim still brings that up every once in a while. Shout out Jim Martin. And it was that influence in me and their, acceptance that, I wasn't going to really be that big into sports or, like academics wasn't ever really my thing. I was good at writing. I had a lot of opportunities for writing that were nice. But, it was always come back to cinema and music for me were the two biggest things. So, yeah, I would go and buy CDs and, you'd hear stuff on the radio, and I was a big tape person back in again, something I picked up from my dad because him and all his friends would trade tapes. And, either they'd be like, full albums or they'd be like little, like disjointed, even sometimes little, snippets of different musical stuff. So what I liked a lot was when I heard a song I really liked on the radio, I would pop a tape in and, hit the record button. And it had to be around like 2000 or 2001. I don't remember the name of the show, but Radio 104 had a show where they played punk rock. And, throughout my youth, I really just grew and grew to really love, like, what I heard out of punk rock. Early on in my life, I got into Green Day and The Offspring. And, that was the first time I heard the term. And, obviously, like, Nirvana was a big deal all through the early 90s. So a lot of the punk rock of that era does kind of wane in the shadow of Kurt Cobain a bit in a way. But yeah, finding The Offspring, especially at a young age, just kind of formed me in a strange way. But from there, I was about nine or 10 when the whole pop punk thing started happening. So, Dude Ranch by Blink was probably when I was like 8 or 9, I want to say. I remember Damn It vividly. There's like certain songs that, I just think they kind of bring me back to the 90s and like, little moments and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Cranberries or the Toadies or all these like weird kind of songs I never paid any attention to when they were being played all over the place, but now I notice them and I'm like, wow, this is like some weird nostalgia to it. There's so many of them because like, I had parents that were very eclectic and they would change the station if they didn't like it. I couldn't talk them down a lot of times, so they would usually go off in their own directions. And So yeah, but you know, it all came to, and you know, going to Cape Cod as a kid, there was a record store that had, you know, Black Flag and Gnostic Front. I remember seeing a Casualty CD there once or twice, and you know, still being a young kid of 10 or 11, you know, it's still kind of all new to me. I remember finding Dead Kennedys, God We Trust Incorporated on vinyl at the place in Cape Cod. And I remember flipping it. I didn't buy it back then, but I flipped it over, and you know, they had the lyrics printed on the back of that one. It was stuff like religious vomit, and I really like got kind of horrified by a lot of it. It was very intense. You know, they have a very kind of aggressive look to a lot of those albums. Like I also remember very early on seeing the cover to Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death, the compilation, where the cover is like this. I can't remember what the background is, but it's got that famous image of Jerry Brown wrapped in barbed wire all around his face. And you know, that was aggressive. And you know, just looking at all the song titles: Kill the Poor, Too Drunk to Fuck, I Killed Children. Like, these were like intense. And you know, obviously at that time I wouldn't get the humor or the satire in it, but the fear and like that adrenaline rush I got from finding this stuff was like really exhilarating for me. And you know, I've been chasing that kind of, you know, thrill the rest of my life, because you know, I'm always on top of trying to find the newest, most, you know, off the wall, like just innovative stuff I can find. Like anybody who's doing something that I have not thought of, but I'm like, yo, I wish I had done that. You know, that is what I search for, you know, and newer. It's just like, do something that like isn't a carbon copy, which sounds weird because, you know, I'm a guy that, you know, grew up listening to like punk rock that is purely made just ripping off the prior generations punk rock. And you know, you can make an argument for that. It's just, you know, it's what I'm drawn to. A lot of it I can't really explain. And you know, it's just, we all have what we love and what speaks to us, and you know, what shapes our musical journey. So around 2003, I was halfway through the 4 years I spent at a Christian school in Mass. I will not name. I'm trying to be cool about this and not name like identifiable places and people. And you know, if I reference a venue, sure, I'll say the name of the venue. But I'm not trying to dox anyone. I'm not trying to get anybody like pissed off or any kind of deep shit. So, you know, I'm going to do my best to avoid any of that. Yeah, just out of respect. You know, a lot of these people have moved on with their lives. They got different shit going on, and they don't want some asshole on fucking Facebook and YouTube going on about like shit they did years ago when they didn't have the best of judgment, arguably. But you know, like, that's what it comes down to. Like, I'm not trying to fuck with people's lives. So just a little disclaimer. But yeah, you know, like to going to that school, you know, also discovering things about people that I would have never noticed like how people will use very cowardly logic to stand behind whatever awful idea they have. So, going to the Christian school, I had to defend myself against a lot of shit that at the time seemed very innocuous. You know, I was starting to become interested in anarchism at a very young age, probably 14 or 15, due to the punk rock records that I was coming in contact with. And being born a just person that does not trust authority figures in general, you know, at that young age, it really spoke something in me that I didn't know existed, which was, you know, this need to belong to something, you know, that isn't totally fucking bogged down in obedience and conformity. And that was a lot of heavy shit to, you know, put on myself when I was going to a Christian school and getting, you know, bullied by people that would just do it no matter what was wrong with me. And, you know, on top of it, you know, mental illness and all the stuff going on around that. It, you know, started to form these kind of opinions on people that I'm still struggling to, you know, detach myself from. It was, you know, in this environment that punk rock really started to speak to me. And it was a way out. When I was going to the Christian school, there was one band that I knew at the school, and they were a Christian band, but they played metalcore. I remember they used to cover Norma Jean's song. So that was cool, you know, it was intense and stuff. And you know, I didn't know anybody in bands by any stretch of the imagination at that time, because most of the people that I knew were, you know, around my age group, or, you know, people around my parents, or, you know, that whole thing. So I didn't know, like, people that were into this music until I met this band. And, you know, they had a bunch of different kinds of people in it. But anyway, I used to go see them because they were like, oh, this is a, you know, way to get out to shows and see some live music. And they would play the basement of Pearl Street. And they'd have some like other young kid punk rock band, and it'd be like the first small little venue like that would have, like, you know, mosh pit going on, and I'd get to jump off stage and all that goofy stuff. And it, you know, it's a lot of good memories from it, but, you know, I was, you know, in a vacuum. A lot of stuff was going on probably in Springfield and Amherst, and even Holyoke, I've heard, had a couple of, you know, venues around that time. But, you know, there was no internet as far as, you know, MySpace or anything like that. You know, I used the internet to just, I think Napster was a thing at that point. You know, YouTube would be a few years away, and so on and so forth. So 2003, you know, I started getting deeper and deeper into this music, and, you know, the expression behind a lot of it. So the way that I would get into certain labels and bands and scenes. And one of these first bands I got into was Bad Religion and their label Epitaph, which at that point, this is around the time probably that Punkorama 7 came out. So if anybody's familiar with the series of Punkorama, you would know what I mean. This was right before, it's 2003, and there was a lot of crazy, like, leaps into different types of stuff. Sing the Sorrow by AFI came out that year, which was, a record at that point I did not like at all, because I'd been listening to AFI for a couple of years before that, and I was used to their, faster, punkier kind of stuff. So, it's taken me till a couple of years ago to actually go back and appreciate what was going on that record. But, there was a lot of that going on at the time. There was a lot of the rise of bands like Have Heart in Boston. Yeah, Bridge 9 was becoming very popular. So, and I can't remember what led to this, but I'd never been to shows come 2003. I'd seen stuff with my parents. We'd gone to concerts. I saw like Weird Al Yankovic at the Big E in like '96. But this was like a venue show. This was open floor. The Webster, this place in Hartford, Connecticut, and I'd probably been through Hartford once or twice, but I didn't really spend any time there. I was still living up in Mass at the time, so it was an experience. I heard about one of the radio station was advertising it, and I went to my dad and I'm like, hey, why don't you take me and my buddy Phil to this show at the Webster? Bad Religion is playing, and be fun. And I forget how it went. I'm just probably paraphrasing, but somehow I talked my dad into letting me go. He took us, and that was the first time I noticed my dad really getting into the whole thing. He brought his camera. He always had his camera. He always filmed or took pictures, but he was always into archiving stuff, and even to the point that later on, when he became a teacher and we made our way down to Connecticut, he'd always, whenever he'd take photos at a concert or something, I remember him blowing them up on like a laser printer and bringing them to the next show and having one of the members sign it. And, he was thrilled about that. He used to have like, little 3-ring binders of autographs and stuff. So, I appreciate all of that. It's, when he's not around anymore, that's going to be what I hold on to the tightest, because that's his like personality in that, it's like the tapes. So we go, I'm getting the idea. My buddy Phil wasn't really into it. And, our lives went in completely different directions. I still hear from him every once in a while, but we're interested in different stuff. We live different lives, and it's like he was a good friend to me when I knew him, and and also moving from Springfield to fucking Old Lyme, which is pretty much the middle of nowhere, Connecticut. Definitely, separated me from anybody I would have known up in Springfield. Aside from one or two people that I probably know through my parents, I don't know anybody up there anymore. So yeah, we went, and it's crazy. The first time I saw a mosh pit, opening was this band Stun. I can't remember if they were local. I saw them later on that year at Warped Tour, the first time I went to Warped Tour. And they were playing on the stage, the second stage, around the time that Dropkick Murphys was playing. And, I wouldn't see Dropkick for a couple more years. And, you know, I wanted to see them that year, but this getting around Warped Tour at that point in the day was kind of difficult. But I remembered that band Stun from the Bad Religion show. It really blew me away to get there, and you know they were passing out promo CDs for their new albums and all that. So I had these like collectible little promos. So that was the beginning of me like liking demos and that whole like tape trading kind of thing on a more, you know, community based instead of just inheriting my parents', you know, old tapes over time. So yeah, and I remember like Webster, you know, I don't know if anybody thinks about this, but it's definitely in like one of the scummiest parts of Hartford, dude. So, you know, standing outside of there on like certain nights was a bit overwhelming back in the day, and it wasn't as many cops around that area. And, you know, they had like broken windows outside of the venue and stuff. You know, it's funny because, you know, it still looks exactly the same out in front of that venue, like all these years later, but it's just something about, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but you know, it just felt a lot more intense down there back then. And, you know, it's probably a lot of just me being a suburban brat, not used to the big city. So after Stun played, they were good. They did a wider cover. They were more like a post-punk, kind of that like garage revival meets post-punk kind of stuff that was going to blow up a few years from then. Snapcase played after them, and I love Snapcase, man. I still stand by, you know, a lot of their records wholeheartedly because it was just like that performance was one of the most intense things I ever saw to that point, because like they had these giant like lights, like strobe lights, I guess, not strobe lights, but like big spotlights that they would just like flash during one of the songs, and there's these bright lights, and it just matched this like intensity to the music. And you know, Snapcase is one of those underrated bands of the whole Victory Records era that they came out of. No, I'd never hear anybody fucking talk about them, and they are one of the most like musically interesting bands to come out of that era. You know, like them and Earth Crisis out of the Victory bands, definitely, like, and Blood for Blood. Those three are, you know, like what made Victory that like important label. And, you know, some of the smaller bands on it, but those three definitely stand out the most. And headlining was Bad Religion, as mentioned before. And, you know, I've seen Bad Religion probably 3 times, twice since then. And, you know, they never disappoint, you know, even if it's a tour where the album I'm not too thrilled with. I still, you know, have a good time just seeing what they come up with. I still love, like, you know, if they have a live set on YouTube or something like that, I still check it out every once in a while. Skip around to the songs I want to hear. And it was just cool because at that point, they'd probably been a band for like 20, 21 years, 22 years. And, you know, just seeing a band of that age, you know, very young, and seeing them just like going at it, you know, probably in the 40s or 50s, whatever it was at the time. You know, it was kind of crazy subconsciously because, you know, I started to realize from a very young age, it's like, you're going to get into this, you better be fucking serious and you better make a commitment. But at the same time, just don't lose sight of who you are. You know, just like, don't let your friends down, but don't let yourself down. It's important to surround yourself with people that have your best interest as far as their best interest, and we're all learning. It's so that was important. I remember during Bad Religion's set, there was a guy who came out of the pit at a certain point with blood running down the side of his head, and that like creeped me out back then. I was like, "Oh my god, he's fucking bleeding on his head," and it's funny to me that even bothered me when I, years later would make myself bleed out of my own head, for either my own aggression release or performance art. So yeah, just being at a venue, you're not sitting, you can kind of walk up to the stage. I wasn't at that point, but as I went to Webster more and more throughout the years, I would venture more further up front. And nowadays I kind of moved to the side, but I'm still pretty far up. I like to get as close to the stage as I can, so I can catch everything. Even that's what I like about smaller shows too. Is like you don't have to fight as many people to get to the front. It's just everybody, and it's more organic, and it's more of a community that way because you can all like get together and sing, and it's not a band; it's an entire village that's producing the show. So a couple of years go by. I don't go to a lot of shows. Like I said, I went to Warped Tour a couple of years. I went to an amazing show I'm going to talk about in the future up in Topsville, Massachusetts, in a barn. And I'm not going to spoil it now, but the lineup was utterly insane that year. So stay tuned for that one. So we ended up moving out of Springfield. My dad ended up becoming a teacher. My mom eventually got a job down on the shoreline as well. So I ended up going to the closest place I had for going to shows. And that was New London when I was a kid. So, or Mystic. You had the Mystic German Club, which was very important to me as a young man. And again, the LNG. So the LNG I found when I was, around New London, or just around Connecticut, trying to find any kind of music thing happening. I might have found CT Punk's board or whatever it was called back then, and would skim through the band lists and all the different links and everything like that, and just try to familiarize myself. I knew a lot of the Boston and Massachusetts-based bands because I would, go up to Boston a lot and see them, or I'd go up to, Cape Cod and see some bands. But I didn't know dick about Connecticut. I'm like, there's fucking bands in Connecticut. It blew me away when I found out Hatebreed was from here at a young age, because it's just Jesus, because you don't think of many things when it comes to Connecticut, even big bands that come from Connecticut. I know, throughout all the decades of seeing this band, Death Threat, it's yeah, they're a Connecticut band, but they're. If anybody outside of the state knows that, they must follow them pretty closely. And yeah, there's a lot of that stuff. Everybody talks about Boston. Everybody talks about Massachusetts. There's probably a lot more bands coming out of Springfield that I don't even remember and such. There's always something going on, but it's it was the early days. I didn't know. I was a kid. There was no still word of mouth was hard for me when I didn't know anybody. But, you know, at this point, the LNG was named Club Hypnotic, I'm pretty sure, was when I first started going there. And first show I saw there was Bury Your Dead, 100 Demons, Sub-Zero, and a bunch of other bands. And this was awesome, man. It was like the first time I saw any of these bands. And the energy of the room, and you know, it's a nice little layout, and it clicked for me right away, man. And it was not that far from, you know, Old Lyme, so I could get my parents to drive me out there if I needed to. So it became the thing. Over the next few years, I just started going there a lot, and it became, you know, my weekly ritual to just see a bunch of shows in New London, and I'd crash on couches out there at points. You know, I'd fucking almost dropped out of high school so I could go and just see shows all the time, and you know, shit was crazy, man. I was serious about the shit, like, right away. So, you know, 2007 rolls around, you know, I just graduated. I'm finally out, you know, I can go and kind of do my own thing, ideally. I don't remember, it must have been July or August, but the Pissed was doing the first reunion that I was around for at the LNG. They were doing a full weekend. Caustic Christ, Behind Enemy Lines, I believe, Broken. Great lineup, and it was cool because Broken at that point would only once a year play an all ages show. So that was cool for me because I only got to see them that one time in Wallingford before that. So, and you know, they were great. And you know, I played the album that was being passed around at that point was Homeland Insecurity, I believe. And I just played that record to death as a kid, man. I played that so often, and you know, maybe I could find a copy of it nowadays. It'd be cool to go back to. And yeah, it just, so that was cool. But like, yeah, it was, what was great about this weekend was it was my introduction to the Pissed. You know, I'd heard a few songs here and there through, you know, the local kids that I hung out with and stuff. But this was like seeing them and like, you know, just learning these songs over that weekend and shit. It was just like insanely fun. And like, I really connected to Al's lyrics very quickly because, you know, this might be like projected and complete nonsense, but you know, I always looked at the way he does his, you know, lyrics almost like this like lecture kind of style. I'm not saying it's like boring lecture-y kind of shit. It's just like the way he just like phrases things just feels like it's a person kind of giving you like a motivational speech or something of that ilk. So, and you know, just again the live, and it's just seeing a band, you know, just keep on doing it and never changing at all, you know, any element of it, but still being like completely authentic about it and just being as honest as possible, not really taking any shit. And that's why, you know, they're one of the most respected bands of that era, especially out of Connecticut, because they just had that thing, so much of it that it just, They're that important band for me out of Connecticut. You know, they're the one that's hit me the deepest. Ideas are Bulletproof is still my favorite Connecticut record ever. And that was a great weekend because I got to see all these different bands. You know, they always had the merch tables that I would, you know, frequent. So, yeah, there was all these smaller venues you had all over the place. You know, you'd go out to Wallingford. We had the American Legion out in Wallingford. We had the Branford Puppet House, which was the infamous location for a couple of Municipal Waste shows, a couple of Common Enemy shows, and a very crazy show, Common Enemy, Copyright Chaos and the Casualties. And that, again, will have to wait for another day. And you'd also have up in Meriden and Wallingford even all these little, you know, one-timer deals pop up. Like you'd have a VFW or a Knights of Columbus or a random bingo hall that wanted to host a show or at least agreed to it. So there is one, though, that really stands out in my memories of being the epicenter of some of the craziest fucking live experiences I've ever been a part of. That would be Meriden Turner Hall. I don't know much about Meriden Turner Hall. I remember this was the place I started frequenting after they had a spot in Meriden somewhere else. That place was weird. I went to like one show there. It was Eat and Run, Stomped on Sight. It might have been their first show. Jim Crowbars did a couple of songs. Maybe Boiling Point. And Culture Shock, I think, played that even. And it was weird because this place was like very, like, had a lot of windows. I remember it had this damn elevator in the back. And so, like, people would mosh and, like, fly into the elevator. And the floor had, like, lights in it. And it would, like, light up. So, like, dancing around there was kind of fucking weird. So that I think they only had, like, one show there. But after that, I started hearing about this place called Meriden Turner Hall. So the first show I went to there was Eat and Run's last show. And, you know, going to shows in, you know, North Haven and shit, or around that area. They would even, bands from that area would make it down to, you know, the LNG. I would see a lot of bands from Newington. Like Rat Bite was a really big one for me as a kid. Al Gore and the Alcoholics, Ottentot, Total End, some stuff out of Torrington probably. Vomit Punks was a lot earlier, but that was, you know, Enfield area, and they always were a very important band for me. So, but anyway, fucking all these bands would come down to like the LNG, so you'd have all these different scenes combined together, and you'd get all these different types of sounds. You know, Meriden had its own kind of like skate punk kind of sound, and Newington had kind of a variation on that kind of sound. Those bands would kind of meld together after a while. Wallingford had a lot of more metal kind of stuff, like death metal kind of stuff. A lot of good hardcore coming out of there. Especially the Legion was important for a lot of that hardcore. And I feel like that room was just the best room you could have for that kind of stuff. And just, yeah, that's going to have to be its own episode. Just wham leg stories, man. That's the shit right there. And I believe that Andreas is having shows there again pretty soon. So whenever that happens, you will get an episode about the great Wham Leg. But right now, I want to talk about Meriden Turner Hall, as I was earlier. Now, Eat and Run's last show, first time I ever been to this spot, pretty sure. We had a lot of really great, like fast, hardcore. You know, they would call it power violence at the time, but you know, it was more just like fast core, just good like posy kind of stuff. Homewrecker, a couple of the bands from the Ohio area, I believe, and in Run, maybe Long Drop, maybe Culture Shock. It's hard for me to remember a lot of these shows, actual lineups. But Eat and Run's set is very memorable, mostly for the reason that on YouTube, I don't know if it's still up there, I forgot to check, but on YouTube for the longest time, there was video of Eat and Run doing infests behind his tongue. But at the beginning of it, you would have the owner of the establishment ranting at us kids, talking about I shouldn't be laughing at this, but he's like, you know, we've gotten these calls from the Meriden Police Department, one for assault. And you know, there's a funny little joke after that of somebody yelling out, yeah, salt and pepper. And it was just hilarious about that because it kind of held this moment that was just fucking hilarious. And they also wanted to take us down for like, you know, underage drinking and stuff, which, you know, at the time I didn't give a shit about. Now I would have been like offended by that kind of thing, but you know, I didn't care. So, you know, he was fucking ranting us out and stuff. Like, this is why I'm surprised this place lasted, because every show there would be just like mayhem. And this was like the first show, and this shit was going on. Like, so basically, what had happened is, without like ratting anybody out again, some kid walked in talking shit. From what I remember, he didn't know where his glasses were. He ran in, started yelling about his glasses, but they were on his head or some dumb shit. And then he's like, ooh. He's talking shit to the wrong people, pretty much. And band is tuning up at the perfect time, and one of them, I think the drummer, starts playing so they start going into like just randomly playing Rain and Blood, and sure enough, this kid got fucking hit, for lack of a better term. Just somebody decked him and he fucking left, from what I remember. And yeah, apparently that kid called the fucking cops, and the owner shows up and, you know, gave us the lip. Like I said, this place was constantly this type of just shenanigans and stuff. You know, in the future, I'll talk about a show there with Product of Waste. I need to figure out who else played this show, but I remember just everybody was tanked. A friend of mine throwing around a bottle of Dubra in the pit. Terry, rest in peace, vomiting on stage because he was drunk or withdrawing, and like people didn't give a shit. They were sliding in, just jumping off the walls. But it was fucking violent and horrifying and disgusting. But it was also like the fucking greatest night ever. So I'll have to go deeper into that once I have more information. So yeah, it's just like that was big. You know, the small venues, you could see stuff that you wouldn't see at like the Webster. They wouldn't allow any of this fucking shit. You know, it's too risky. There's too many fucking flight risks. Is what we like to do. And then, you know, it gets crazier when you get out to New York. And, you know, once I got out to New Haven, I started staying at Daggett Street after pretty much dropping out of college and a couple of other places, and started spending a lot of time at Daggett Street up in New Haven. I had some friends living there, and at the time I was probably kind enough to have them want me to stay. I was probably okay. But it was a big deal for me because I'd only gone to like Toad's Play shows and stuff. I was like 22, 23 probably. And it was that community back again, because I had really become disillusioned with New London and its kind of scene around there and my place within it. And kind of wanted to find something new, something that felt a little bit more accepting, and something that I felt more freedom to express myself. Because I also lived with my parents at this time. So, going to New London is one thing, but, I had to get the ride home from them. And a lot of my schedule, I had to work around their schedule, and they were in their 50s at this point. So a lot of this was not working for them. And, there was a lot of trouble at home, and I'll leave it at that. But eventually my travels to New Haven led me to, start looking for a living situation up there. And after a few years of everything, I ended up moving into New Haven. I lived in a couple of different spots, one with some people and one alone. And what was always an event, you had the local shows, and you'd see some great stuff at, the bars, Cafe 9, Toads, even like Elm Bar, Rudy's bar. The cool thing about New Haven is there's always like a different kind of scene you can get into, or a different bar you can go to, or you can always escape kind of like the same old at certain points in New Haven's history. So that's always been nice, a little comfort zone kind of thing. But the event was still, going to New York was a big thing back then. So I was living in my spot that I had by myself on Chapel Street in New Haven, and just bombing around online. This place, the Acheron. Now, I'd been to the Acheron once or twice. I saw Inferno, and I believe Tervi Cadet there before this show, and and it's like, why not? Let me go to New York, walk around a while. I was depressed. I had nothing to do. There was Tom Boot Boys, Sad Boys, Lotion, a couple of other bands. Like, hell yeah, that looks like fucking awesome. I knew Tom and Boot Boys. I mean, being into Japanese punk, you inevitably hear the pogo nonsense, whether you like it or not. So, just jumped on the train and went. So, halfway through the set, Sad Boys, well, not halfway through the night, Sad Boys get off the stage. They finish their set, and little band, Who Killed Spiky Jacket, played. They did a 15-second set, pretty much got like up to the first verse, I'd say, of whatever song they were doing. And I'd seen them a few times, so I knew what was up. Once I saw them start to take the stage, I moved as far back to, the back of the Acheron that I could. And the Acheron was like this tight little like corridor of a venue. So like you're either in front of the stage or you're at this little side stage area, which is usually where I was. I remember being right next to the stage during Terry Cadet was like definitely the highlight of any New York trip I would make. And they had the bar next door, which was always nice because you could get a drink and sit. And if there was a band you didn't really care about, and the atmosphere at New York shows is always great. They're very accepting there. They're very like, everybody's cool at New York shows. I never have problems at New York shows, which is nice because I'm so far away. I don't need to get into a fight like 2 states out. Like it's not fun. But so yeah, so Sad Boys finish. Who Killed Spikey Jack comes up, and I just remember the sound guy gets up and goes to the stage. It's on YouTube, and he's like yelling at everybody, like, "You're setting off your fucking mortar." Whatever, you couldn't hear him because he didn't have the mic on. He got up in one guy's face, and I remember them pulling him off the fucking. Either they pulled him off the stage or he jumped down and started scuffle with somebody. And then, after all this, I don't remember what happened, but eventually Tom and Boot Boys went on, and I was right next to the stage. Because I'm like, fuck it. These guys are not going to throw mortar attacks at, during Tom and Boot Boys. And, they don't want to get kicked out. Whatever. You gotta do what you gotta do. So Tom and Boot Boys, man, is like, holy shit. They're drunk on their records, but holy shit, if you see them live, the guitarist cannot play one song correctly fully. Like, he will make a mistake 20 times per song. And it's just like, it's the fun of it. You just sing along with these like nonsensical fucking broken English kind of lyrics. And that's the fun of it. And, he got naked at the end of the set. Did some dumb joke about how his like wife told him he had the smallest penis she ever seen in his life. And I don't fucking know. It was mayhem, man. And like, New York was like that kind of place. I had the shows in New Haven where crazy shit would happen on a small scale, but holy shit, man, some of the stuff in New York, you can't make it up, and it's just like so amazing. I've seen so many venues in like little alleyways. You walk down this alleyway, I was like, what the fuck is this? And you get in the back of this giant venue with cool artwork and sick shit everywhere, and like these little like outdoor like markets. And I don't know if Punk Alley or whatever they call it is a thing anymore, but that was like, I always heard about that, and I'm like, that's fucking cool. Like a little like marketplace of just punk stuff, like a little flea market. That's what it's all about, man. So after that, shit went down at my apartment on Chapel Street that ensured I could not live there anymore. So I was without a place to really be for about a month in 2015. So I got sober, stopped drinking, haven't touched it since. And moved into the apartment you are seeing me stream from now. And it's probably the best place I've ever lived. Even outdoing my parents' house. So, in moving here, I discovered as I always do, the local hangout. And I believe I probably found it a year before, and this was called Crunch House. And those of you who know about Crunch House, who follow Crunch House, keep your ears open. I have a little something coming up with them in the near future that I would like to see a lot of you attend. So stay tuned for that. And it was great having this once I moved here because, you know, it was a mile from me. So I could walk there anytime I want and just catch whatever's happening. You know, I'd go on these like offshoot nights. Like I wouldn't even check who's playing. I'm just like, there's a show. All right, I'll show up. And if it's not good, I'll leave. But if it's great, I'll stick around and get some fun out of it. I can't remember this lineup at all because it was one of those nights I just randomly showed up and I'm like, yo, I'm going to get down with whatever's happening. And sure enough, great fucking band, current band from Colombia called Raw Brigade was playing. They were headlining, and this band was tight as fuck. They had this real like youth crew, you know, like bit of like late 90s like fat like 10-yard fight kind of stuff going on, or Kid Dynamite. Really good like sing-alongs. They did an amazing cover of Something Must Be Done by Antidote, and dude, the place just erupted. I was jumping off the walls, you know, we're all like and there wasn't that many people there. It was the fun thing of just catching this band that put out this energy that was just overwhelming in front of like not that big an audience, and they gave it their all. You know, it reminds me of another band I love called La Armada. I used to see La Armada every time they played Connecticut because I knew every show there would be a different vibe, there would be a different, you know, intensity to everything, but it would always be like the greatest show I ever saw. And you know, if they ever start touring again, I don't know what's going on with them as a band, but if they ever play your town, La Armada, catch that shit automatic and catch, you know, Raw Brigade. You know, these are bands that, you know, are really taking hardcore and just making it something new, but also just keeping that energy, keeping that youth to it, keeping like what's important about like good hardcore. And, you know, seeing it in front of, you know, a couple of kids, you know, at a random Wednesday night was amazing. So coming back around, I'm going to tell my last story. And this one, out of all of these, is probably the most legendary venue, if you want to call it that. That's Tompkins Square Park. Earlier this year, there was a little bit of controversy with this because certain individuals in the New York hardcore scene put on a concert. I almost went, but I had my DJ equipment delivered that day and had to install everything, and you know, did not have the time to go to New York, so I opted out. And I'm not going to give my opinion of that here because I could say a lot that could get me, you know, in trouble with, you know, people I don't need to be in trouble with. But that's not what's important. So push that aside. The day I went was back, I'd say 2017 or 2018. It was the Jimmy G from Murphy's Law benefit. He was having some kind of testicular problems from what I remember, and he had to get medical help. So they threw a big, you know, party in Tompkins Square, and you know, it was all the usual cast of characters from around there. And yeah, I took the train up, and got some pizza on the way. Had a nice walk down to Tompkins, and I was really blown away by how that place is, because it's like I have a love of open air kind of venues, where you're outside, and it's like you also kind of collide with like the normies on just enjoying walking their dogs in Tompkins Square Park and all these like, but they're used to that. I mean, if you've been in New York more than once over the past like 20 years, you're gonna see that shit just in abundance. I'm surprised they don't have a guy with a giant mohawk, guarding the subways at this point. So yeah, but like Sheer Terror, Killing Time, Combust, like hell yeah, man. I've seen Sheer Terror plenty of times. One of the dumbest New York shows I ever went to, mostly on the venue and its patronage, because Sheer Terror killed it that night, but the audience sucked. And if you've seen Sheer Terror, you know how bad an audience can fuck up a good Sheer Terror set, because Paulie's just gonna fuck with everybody in the audience, and if the audience isn't on the same page, it's not gonna be a very enjoyable evening for anybody. It was a good set, but it wasn't their prime location. Nobody gave a shit. The whole audience was very like not into any of the bands. There was like no moshing. And it was like Slapshot opened, but I don't know. But I saw Sheer Terror a few more times. Saw him with I Hate God, Negative Approach. Saw him at the State House. Saw him earlier this year at Cherry Street. And so I got plenty of chances to see them. But Tompkins was like fun, because I remember the year before they had the rabies tribute at Tompkins, where they had Todd Youth, rest in peace, and I guess other members of Warzone come out and do Warzone songs in tribute to rabies. And they had all these different bands, all these different singers and people within New York hardcore come out and do the vocals, and it's just cool. And it was just looked like so much fun. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go do that. And it was like a random day. I was downtown. I was like, dude, this is happening in New York. Like, fuck it, man. It was like $20 to get in or something. It was all donations and stuff. So I went up, and to start off, like Combust brought the house down. I'm a real big fan of them still, because I saw them at a State House a couple of times, and they got a great energy, kind of like a Madball, kind of a little bit of hip hop, a little bit of early '90s metalcore stuff going on. Just like great front man, really gets the crowd going. They did a cover of Murphy's Law, Quest for Herb, so that was fun. Killing Time just came on, and that's one of my favorite New York hardcore albums of all time, is Bright Side. And that one I found early. They had it at Red Scroll. And I remember getting it on CD at Red Scroll for like $5, some like extremely like cheap price, as I now know. So like I played the shit out of that record, and seeing them was fun. Like getting to sing along with all those fucking songs was just like a thrill, man. Like it was great. And then Sheer Terror comes on, and as usual, just kills it. This was like a big deal because the Proud Boys was a thing coming around at that time, and they were, threatening or saying they were going to show up to the show and, make their presence known, and, march singing songs by Sheer Terror among other bands, and, just really made an obnoxious spectacle of themselves. And, Paulie came out on social media and whatever, and he's like, look, don't, if you're like repping Proud Boys and shit like that, do not come to our fucking shows. And sure enough, that day he got up on stage and really like put it down where he stands, and you know, it was heavy. And you know, Paulie, I really respect him as an artist because, you know, unlike any other like hardcore front man, he definitely has this like kind of emotional side to him. You know, the typical hardcore front man is either like, you know, this, you know, aggressive, like skinny, tiny guy jumping off the stage and stuff. And, you know, it's like, you know, everything's about like, you know, tougher than you know, I'm more edge than you and all this type of shit. Then you have a band like Sheer Terror coming on stage and just like, you know, he's picking on the crowd and, you know, talking shit on himself. You actually listen to the lyrics and there's nothing like it at that time. You know, even Blood for Blood and like Life of Agony and all these bands that were influenced by Sheer Terror, they didn't really have the same kind of, you know, vibe lyrically and, you know, the atmosphere of that band, you know, the metallic kind of riffage of songs like, you know, Cup of Joe and Ashes, fucking Burning Time. Just, yeah, it goes on and on. Here to Stay, I Spoiler, Through Your Bitch. These are songs that are just like, just the combined energy of that band and, you know, what they're playing and Paul's just like, just painful yelps and these amazingly like heartbreaking croons that he's capable of, and just the band, the you know, throughout all the dramas and stuff that band goes through, it's like cool to see like the backing bands that he can get, and like they're all like serious, and he is very serious about like what he does, and it shows. And they're one of my favorite bands of all time, and definitely seeing them is like probably one of my favorite live bands. You know, it's such a thrill. They're up there with I Hate God, Negative Approach, you know, Cro-Mags, if that ever, you know, gets settled. But it's like I've seen Cro-Mags like 10 times. I don't need to see fucking Cro-Mags anymore. But yeah, it's whatever. I don't mind seeing them. Descendants is always great to see live. I've seen Cocksparrer a bunch. You know, another one I can't see ever again. The Business, rest in peace, Mickey Fitz. You know, that was a drag, but you know, I saw The Business 4 or 5 times, and you know, I get to get satisfaction out of that my own way. So yeah, these are shows that like, you know, really formed who I am and like why I make the art that I make and all the influences that I got. And there's so many more, you know, like I could take any of these venues just that I mentioned today, and just like do an entire episode just talking about some of the craziest and best and most like awe-inspiring live experiences I've had at these shows. So yeah, if you guys dig this, get down there in the comments. You know, if you can share this, cool. If you can like it, if you can, but I really want you down in the comments to tell me what you want to hear me talk about. You know, if you're around me back in the day and you got this memory of some show we were at and some craziness, or even a venue or just a general scene around that time, you know, get at me. Like, let's talk about it in the comments and I'll make an episode about it. And, you know, I like to bring people on. You know, I'm going to be streaming the rest of the week, probably a couple hours a day if I can. And, you know, I'm going to try and do a different type of format each day of streaming. And, you know, depending on which one's more successful, whatever I feel I should end up doing, you know, I'll move on it, you know, accordingly. But yeah, I'm going to be trying some stuff. And if you like what you're seeing, like I said, down in the comments, tell me what you would like to see me talk about, and if you would like to be a guest, we'll work something out. Yeah, and keep tuning back. Again, I'm posting this on YouTube and Facebook. You can find me on YouTube at Manzerfaust Productions, and on Facebook is Mike Manzer. And probably going to take a audio version of this and post it on the kind of vacant lately Nitekvlt Anchor page, which will allow you to hear it on Spotify and Stitcher and whatever other format you listen to podcasts on. I am on Instagram under the name Mikey Dirt. Okay, so like okay, so I'm bad at keeping a name on Instagram. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it down in the comments. But where I know you can find me on Instagram, that I'm gonna start updating again, is Nitekvlt Podcast on Instagram. So that is NITEKVLT PODCAST, and I'll be updating all y'all on what's going on here, and me and Chris will be recording new episodes, new format, but new episodes. We want to get into some deep dives, some international kind of scene reviews. I want to do a little thing on goth music and its history. I got a lot of ideas, man. So I'm going to be experimenting the rest of the week. So if you follow me on YouTube and Facebook, you can tune in, and feel free to join the chat. This is my first day doing this, so I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing, but if I get more viewers in the future, come on down. We'll love. You're part of the conversation. I feel like with these venue and scene kind of reviews, it helps to have like another person there, just to remind me who played and like where that was, and the dates and everything like that, because I can't remember shit, man. It's hard these days because they fall off for so long. Excuse me. It's what it is, man. But this is Nitekvlt. We are back. I am back, and I am going to start using this again. So stay tuned, man. We're gonna have so much coming up, hopefully, and I hope you all enjoy it. So this is Mike Manzer, and I'll see you next time.